reached the edge of the town. The lights of the settlement flickered behind him as he walked through an old gate and into the outskirts. The area was barren, more desert than anything else, and the air smelled faintly of sulfur. That's when he saw her. She was standing by a cliffside, staring out into the horizon as the last rays of the sun turned the sky a fiery orange. Her silhouette was sharp against the backdrop of the fading light, a figure that seemed too powerful, too otherworldly. She was tall, with striking features, high cheekbones, sharp eyes, and dark skin that shimmered in the twilight. The people of the planet weren't wrong. There was something about her presence that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Yet, it wasn't fear that gripped him, but an undeniable pull. It was as though something in the universe had connected him to her, a thread that led him to this very moment. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do, his heart beating a little faster. She turned, sensing his presence, and their eyes met. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, a mix of curiosity and something darker. But it was also a deep sadness, as if she had been waiting for someone to see her for who she truly was, not the weapon or the monster the stories made her out to be.
"You're the one they warn people about, aren't you?" Marcus said, his voice steady but curious.
She didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied him with an unreadable expression. Her gaze swept over his face, lingering just a little too long on his eyes.
"They say I'm dangerous," she finally spoke, her voice low and melodic, carrying a weight that seemed to echo in the silence.
"They say I can kill anyone who gets too close." Marcus nodded slowly. "And do you?"
In fact, she looked almost amused by it. If I wanted to, I suppose I could.
"But that's not what I want." Her words were soft, almost as if they were meant for him, alone.
There was an honesty in her voice that Marcus wasn't expecting. He had been braced for arrogance, for cold indifference, but instead, there was vulnerability. "Then what do you want?" Marcus asked. She looked down at her hands, clenching and unclenching them, as though trying to rid herself of some invisible burden. "I want to be loved," she whispered, her eyes meeting his once more. "Is that too much to ask for?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus felt a strange sensation stir in his chest. Well, it was as if he was looking at a different side of her, a side that no one else seemed to see. It was easy to imagine her as a monster, someone who had the power to destroy worlds. But standing before him, she seemed so human, so lost. Without thinking, Marcus took a step closer, his boots crunching softly in the sand. "I don't think wanting love is dangerous." She didn't move, but her eyes softened just slightly. For a brief moment, Marcus could see the faintest flicker of hope, like a light in the dark, and it made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Empathy? You should go back to town," she said suddenly, her voice firm again, the vulnerability gone.
"It's better for you if you stay away from me." But Marcus didn't step back.
He stood there, eyes locked on hers. "I'm not afraid of you. Everyone is afraid of me," she replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "And you should be too. You don't know who I am." "I think I'm starting to understand," Marcus said, his voice calm, unwavering. "And I don't think you're what they say." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The wind kicked up, scattering dust across the desolate land, but still, Cora stood there. And for the first time, she didn't seem quite so alone. Eventually, she took a step toward him. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe you're the first one to not be afraid." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he realized that, despite the stories, despite the warnings, he wasn't scared. Instead, he felt a connection to her, an unspoken understanding. He didn't know what it meant or where it would lead, but he knew that he couldn't walk away now, not from her. As the last light of day disappeared and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Marcus stood beside her. Two strangers in a vast, lonely universe. And for the first time, neither of them felt entirely alone. Marcus had never felt the weight of isolation quite like this. It was as if the moment he stepped onto the barren soil of this alien planet, he had been thrust into a world of secrets, a world where nothing was as it seemed. And standing next to Cora, the alien woman whom the town feared, he knew there were even more truths hidden beneath the surface. Truths that the people of this planet were too afraid to uncover. He had thought he understood fear, having seen it countless times during his travels across the galaxy. But fear of the unknown? Fear of something so different, so utterly alien, that it made even the bravest men cower in their boots? That was something entirely new. The townspeople had warned him about Cora, warning him that she was a walking weapon, a force that no one could control, not even herself. Yet here she was, standing before him, her presence commanding and quiet all at once. The evening breeze ruffled her dark hair, and in that moment, she seemed less like the monster the town painted her to be, and more like a woman who had suffered in silence for far too long. After a long moment of silence, Cora spoke again, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness that made Marcus's heart ache. "You don't understand," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "You don't know what it's like to be feared by everyone around you, to have your every move watched, your every action judged." He had heard stories, rumors that floated around like dust in the wind, but he had no idea what the truth actually was.
What do you mean?
He asked, taking a step closer to her. He wasn't afraid anymore. If anything, he was more determined to understand her. Cora turned to face him fully, her dark eyes locking with his. For a moment, Marcus could see the vulnerability in her gaze, the deep hurt that lay hidden beneath the layers of strength she had built up over the years. "I wasn't always like this," she continued, her voice low, barely above a whisper. "I was once part of a beautiful, peaceful people. My kind lived in harmony with the universe, traveling across the stars, learning from the worlds we visited. We were explorers, not conquerors." Marcus didn't speak. He simply listened, sensing that Cora had carried these words with her for far too long, words she had never spoken aloud to anyone before.
"Then the war came," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "We were caught in the middle of a conflict that wasn't ours to fight.
The Empire, the one that controls so many of the galaxies now, wanted to wipe us out, to use us for their own gain. They destroyed our planet, killed my people, and turned me into a weapon." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He had heard of the Empire. Of course, they were a brutal force that conquered and enslaved entire civilizations. But to hear the pain in Cora's voice, to know that she had been one of the victims of their cruelty, filled him with an intense sense of anger. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but he held back, unsure of how. "I was captured," she continued, her voice steady now but still heavy with the weight of memory. "They experimented on me, altered my body, made me stronger, faster. They turned me into something monstrous. I wasn't Cora anymore. I was just a weapon. I killed for them."
I did their bidding without question. Marcus felt his heart ache for her.
He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to lose everything, to become something you didn't recognize. "But you're not like that anymore," he said softly, his voice gentle.
"You're free now." Cora shook her head slowly, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "Am I?"
"Free?" she repeated, almost to herself. "I'm not sure I know what freedom is anymore. I've spent so long being afraid of what I might do, of who I might hurt. And when I met you, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could find something else. But the people here, they see me as a monster. The same way I was seen by the Empire. The same way I see myself sometimes. Marcus stepped forward then, closing the distance between them. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I don't see you as a monster," he said firmly, his voice carrying the sincerity he felt in his heart. "I don't know what happened to you, but I know you're not the sum of your past actions."
You don't have to be that person anymore. For the first time since he had met her, Cora looked truly vulnerable.
The walls she had built up around herself seemed to crumble, if only for a moment, and Marcus could see the woman beneath the armor she had worn for so long. He could see the hurt, the fear, and above all, the longing, a longing for connection, for understanding, for someone who would see her as more than just a weapon. "But they won't stop," Cora said, her voice thick with emotion.
"The Empire, they've been looking for me. They'll never stop hunting me."
"And if they find me, they'll kill anyone who stands in their way."
"I'm dangerous, Marcus. And the people here? They're not ready for what I can do." Marcus stood there, his mind racing. He understood now. Cora wasn't a monster. She was a woman who had been broken, who had been forced into a role she never wanted, and who had fought tooth and nail to survive. But in the process, she had become something the universe feared.
"I'm not going to let them hurt you," Marcus said, his voice firm, determined. "And I won't let them hurt anyone else because of you."
"If they want to come for you, they'll have to go through me first."
Cora's eyes widened, surprise flashing across her face. "But you don't know what I'm capable of,"
she whispered. "You don't know the kind of destruction I can cause." Marcus stepped even closer, so close now that their bodies were nearly touching. "I don't care what you've done," he said, his voice low and intense. "What matters is who you are now. And I see you. I see the person you can be, the person you want to be." Cora was silent for a long time, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read the truth in his words. And then, finally, she nodded just slightly, as though acknowledging something deep inside herself. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she said softly. "I've been alone for so long, Marcus. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." Marcus reached out then, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said softly. "But you're not alone anymore." "Not as long as I'm here." Cora looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching. For a brief second, Marcus thought she might push him away, but instead she gave him a small, tentative smile. It was fragile, but it was there, a sign of hope, of a possibility for something more. For the first time, Marcus felt the stirrings of something more than just empathy. He felt the beginning of something deeper, something that could bridge the vast gulf of difference between them. A human and an alien weapon standing together, with the possibility of something resembling love in the air. The days that followed felt like a strange dream, one that Marcus wasn't entirely sure he was ready to wake up from. As he spent more time with Cora, he saw a side of her that no one else had the chance to witness. The woman who was once feared for her powers was slowly starting to show a different side. A side of tenderness, vulnerability, and even humor. It was hard to imagine that she had once been the weapon that the Empire had created, but he could see glimpses of it in the way she moved, the way her eyes occasionally flashed with something he couldn't quite name. But there were still moments of uncertainty. Moments when Cora seemed to close off again, when the weight of her past seemed too much to bear. Marcus couldn't blame her. He couldn't even imagine what it must have been like to live through what she had. She had been forced to become something she wasn't, something monstrous, and the consequences of that were still hanging over her, like a shadow. One night, as they sat together on a rock near the edge of the cliff, staring out at the distant stars, Marcus noticed a change in her demeanor. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw clenched, and her eyes were focused on something far away, something he couldn't see.
What is it? Marcus asked gently, not wanting to push her but needing to understand. Cora didn't answer at first. She just stared into the night, the weight of the silence between them growing heavier with each passing second. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Moses." "They're coming!" she said. Marcus frowned, confusion flickering across his face.
Who's coming? The Empire, Cora replied, her tone hardening.
"I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me. They never stop hunting me." Marcus's heart sank. He had known the risks, of course, but hearing her say it out loud made it feel more real, more dangerous. He had hoped that they might be able to escape, that they might find some way to outrun the Empire's reach. But now, with Cora's words hanging in the air, he realized how naive he had been. The Empire wouldn't just let her go. They would send their best soldiers after her, and they wouldn't stop until they had her back, or until she was dead. "What do we do?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. Cora turned to face him, her eyes dark and serious. "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I spent my whole life running, Marcus. And now I can't even protect the people who've shown me kindness. The Empire will come for this place, for you, and there's nothing I can do to stop them." Marcus's chest tightened at her words, but he didn't look away. He wasn't about to let her push him away, not now, not when they had come this far. He had already made his choice, and he wasn't going to back down. "You don't have to do this alone," he said firmly. "I won't let them hurt you. We'll fight them together."
We'll find a way. Cora's eyes softened, but there was a hint of sadness in them.
"You don't understand," she said softly. "You don't know what they'll do."
"I've seen it before. They'll destroy everything. Everyone."
And it'll be my fault. Marcus reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm.
"It's not your fault, Cora. You didn't ask for this."
You didn't choose to become their weapon, and you don't have to carry that burden anymore.
You're not alone. For a long moment, Cora didn't say anything.
She just looked at him, as if weighing his words, as if trying to decide whether or not she could trust him. And for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of something he hadn't seen in her before. Hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I don't have to do this alone." But even as she said the words, Marcus could sense the doubt lingering in her heart. He didn't blame her. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of her past on her shoulders. It wasn't something that could be fixed overnight, but he was willing to try. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Cora spent hours training, refining her combat skills, making sure she was ready for whatever might come. Marcus stayed by her side, offering support, offering help, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. She was terrified, not just for herself, but for the people around her. She had seen the destruction the Empire was capable of, and the thought of bringing that kind of violence to the small town where she had found some semblance of peace was almost too much for her to bear. One evening, as the two of them sat together by the fire, Marcus looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of the choices they had to make. He knew that the Empire wouldn't stop. He knew that they would come for Cora, and when they did, everything would change. But what worried him more than anything was the look in Cora's eyes, the look of someone who was preparing herself to sacrifice everything, to fight alone so that others wouldn't have to suffer. He couldn't let that happen. He couldn't let her carry that burden any longer. "Cora," he said, his voice soft but firm, "you don't have to do this alone."
We'll stand together, no matter what happens. You're not just a weapon.
"You're a person. And I care about you. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something that almost looked like fear. But she didn't pull away. Instead, She met his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can let anyone in, Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can trust anyone again. After everything I've done, after everything I've become, I don't know if I'm capable of love." Marcus's heart ached for her. He had seen the pain in her eyes, the way she carried the weight of her past like an anchor dragging her down. But he also saw something else, a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of something that could grow if given the chance. "You don't have to be perfect," he said, his voice gentle but filled with conviction. "You just have to be you. And that's enough for me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled between them, the only sound in the quiet night. And in that moment, Marcus knew that he had made his choice. No matter what happened next, no matter how dangerous things got, he would stay by Cora's side. He wouldn't let her fight this battle alone. The next morning, the first signs of the Empire's arrival came. A group of ships appeared on the horizon, their sleek, intimidating shapes cutting through the sky like a storm. Cora's heart sank as she saw them, but she didn't hesitate. She turned to Marcus, her eyes steely with determination. "This is it," she said quietly. "They're here." Marcus nodded, his heart racing. He had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The Empire was coming, and there was no turning back. But as he looked at Cora, standing beside him, he knew that they weren't alone anymore. They had each other, and together they would face whatever came next. The battle was about to begin, and Marcus was ready. The tension in the air was almost unbearable as Marcus and Cora stood side by side, watching the ships of the Empire approach. The low hum of the ship's engines grew louder, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. The wind picked up, swirling the sand in all directions, but neither Marcus nor Cora moved. They stood firm, staring at the impending storm that was about to break. Cora's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. She could feel the weight of her past pressing down on her. The Empire wasn't just a group of enemies. It was a reminder of everything she had lost, the people she had loved, the peaceful life she had once known. All of it had been ripped away by their cruel hands, and now they were back, hunting her once again. Marcus stood beside her, not flinching, not looking away. He had seen the fear in her eyes, and he knew it wasn't just about the danger they were facing now. It was the weight of her past, the burden she had carried for so long. But he wasn't afraid. Not of her, and not of the Empire. He had made a promise, one he intended to keep. "They'll be here soon," Cora said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with a sadness Marcus had come to recognize. She wasn't just preparing for a fight. She was preparing for the possibility that she might not make it out alive. Marcus turned to her, his gaze soft but determined. "We're not going to let them take you. Not now. Not ever." Cora gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of happiness, but one of acceptance. For the first time in her life, she felt like she didn't have to do everything alone. She had someone standing beside her. And that, in itself, was enough to give her a sliver of hope. The ships were getting closer now, their dark shapes cutting through the sky like shadows. The Empire's fleet was large, but Marcus wasn't intimidated. He had faced battles before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about freedom, about choosing to stand for something more than just self-preservation. It was about fighting for the people who had given Cora a chance, even after everything she had done. "You're not a weapon anymore," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to fight them alone." Cora looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read something deeper. She didn't answer immediately, but she didn't need to. Her hand reached out and gently squeezed his arm. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, one of trust, one of gratitude. The Empire's ships began to land, kicking up clouds of dust as they touched down on the barren landscape. The ground trembled beneath their weight. Marcus could hear the low rumble of engines powering down, followed by the sound of boots hitting the ground. The enemy had arrived. Without a word, Cora stepped forward, her posture straight, her expression hardening into one of determination. Marcus followed her, every step a declaration of defiance. The battle was about to begin, and there was no turning back. The first wave of soldiers emerged from the ships, their armor gleaming under the harsh sunlight. They were well trained, their movements sharp and coordinated, but they weren't prepared for Cora. She stood her ground, her fists clenched at her sides. Her eyes glowed with a quiet intensity that made the soldiers hesitate. They had come to capture her, to bring her back into their control. But they hadn't anticipated someone willing to fight for her freedom. The lead soldier, a tall man with a cold, calculating expression, stepped forward. "Cora!" he said, his voice commanding. "We've come to bring you back. You've been a rogue long enough." Cora's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering.
"I'm not going back," she said, her voice low but full of conviction. "I'm not your weapon anymore." The soldier sneered, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon.
"You don't have a choice." Marcus moved to stand beside her, his stance protective. Ready, the soldiers paused, noticing him for the first time. Cora wasn't alone anymore. There was someone who would fight beside her, someone who would stand against the Empire, even if it cost him his life. The air grew thick with tension as the two sides stood facing each other. The soldiers moved to encircle Cora and Marcus, but neither of them flinched. Cora felt the power surging through her, the abilities the Empire had forced upon her. But this time, she was in control. This time, she wouldn't be their puppet. With a sudden movement, Cora extended her hand, and the ground beneath the soldiers' feet began to shake. A shockwave rippled through the earth, knocking several of them off their feet. The remaining soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. "Move!" the lead soldier shouted, his voice strained as he ordered his men to regroup, but it was too late. Cora was already in motion, her body moving with the fluidity of someone who had spent years honing her skills. She was no longer a weapon of destruction. She was a force of nature, determined to protect the people who had given her a chance. Marcus fought alongside her, using his knowledge of tactics and his strength to hold off the soldiers. He wasn't as skilled as Cora, but he had something they didn't: heart. He fought, not for glory, but for survival. For Cora, for the people who had been kind to her, despite the darkness that lingered in her past. The battle raged on, the sound of clashing weapons and shouts filling the air, but amidst the chaos, Marcus kept his eyes on Cora. He watched as she fought, her every move graceful and powerful, her strength unmatched. She was no longer the woman trapped by her past, no longer the weapon the Empire had created. She was free, and nothing was going to take that from her. The soldiers began to retreat, their morale breaking as they realized they couldn't win. The Empire had underestimated Cora, underestimated the power of her resolve. They thought they could control her, break her spirit, but they were wrong. She had never truly been theirs to control. She had always belonged to herself, and with Marcus by her side, she had finally found the strength to fight back. As the last of the soldiers fled, Cora stood tall, her chest heaving with exertion. Her body was covered in sweat, her clothes torn from the fight, but there was a look of triumph in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had truly won. She had faced the Empire, and she had come out victorious. She was no longer a weapon. She was a person, and that was something the Empire could never take away from her. Marcus walked over to her, his face filled with pride and relief. "You did it," he said softly, his voice full of admiration. Cora looked at him, a small smile tugging at